At the will reading my dad burned the 38mm check my grandfather left me, I just smiled. At the will reading my dad burned the 38 check my grandfather left me, I just smiled. I stepped into the room with the feeling of walking into a war zone, not because of bombs or bullets, but because every pair of eyes cut like a dagger. A polished slice of Manhattan honed by brick and power, the 27th floor of Sullivan Grant's office building overlooked the Hudson River, but not a single breeze was gentle enough to soften the chill in that room. My father, Leonard Monroe, didn't stand up. He looked at me as if I were a stray cockroach or a technical glitch no one bothered to fix. My sister Alison was already seated, legs crossed, her tailored business suit as sharp as the smug expression on her face. If her gaze could speak, it would probably say, "You don't belong here." Before I could even sit down, the seasoned voice of the head attorney, Sullivan Grant, cut through, extinguishing any hope of pleasantries. "Let's begin. No small talk. No welcome home." No one asked if I still had all my limbs after 3 deployments in the Middle East. I wasn't surprised. The last time I saw these faces, my father, my sister, was 5 years ago after a dinner where silence was the dessert. I took the leather chair farthest from them, my hands still carrying the morning's New York dew, my heart beating steadily like it did in boot camp calm before the storm. If you've ever had a disastrous family reunion, drop a comment below this video, because my family's story might just top yours. I'm Rachel Monroe, former U.S. soldier, once a logistics sergeant in Kandahar, then Mosul. And today I'm the one summoned to the reading of my grandfather's will, Thomas Aldridge, founder of Alien Dynamics, one of the East Coast's largest private defense conglomerates. He passed away 3 weeks ago at 81, leaving a void no one in this room knew how to fill. Except me. Evelyn opened the file on the table. Her voice was steady, each word clear as a marching order. According to the legally binding will signed at this office on October 16th this year, Mr. Thomas Aldridge has allocated his estate as follows. My sister adjusted her hair, her eyes confident that victory was within her grasp. To Mr. Leonard Monroe, a first-edition Hemingway novel collection, and a $10,000 honorary donation to the Corporate Ethics Society. I swear my father smirked. I wanted to laugh too, because no ethics society could ever cleanse what he'd done his whole life. To Miss Alison Monroe, the Vermont estate, and the antique Steinway piano. A nod. Exactly as expected. Just enough to save face, not enough to stir resentment. Evelyn turned to the final page. I saw her eyes briefly flicker toward me, expressionless, but with a slight hesitation. And to Rachel Monroe, the entirety of the remaining estate. This includes controlling shares of Alien Dynamics' unallocated real estate financial accounts and full decision-making authority over all aspects of the corporation's management. Effective immediately. I heard a snap, not of an object, but of the air itself. No one spoke for a few seconds. My father turned to Evelyn, then to me, his feigned shock barely masking his humiliation. Alison froze, her lips parting, then closing again. What Leonard asked, as if grammar itself had been insulted. "Are you joking?" "Not at all. This is a notarized document signed in sound mind with witnesses and medical confirmation," Evelyn replied without looking up. She produced a check, my name clearly printed, the amount $38, $246 dated October 17th. Before I could reach for it, Leonard snatched it. "You think this brings you back?" And right there, he pulled out his familiar silver Zippo lighter, flicked it open, and set the check ablaze. The flames roared like a final outburst of rage, consuming the ink and signature of the grandfather I once believed was great. I didn't scream. I didn't jump up. I just smiled, the kind of smile soldiers use when they already know how the script ends. Because what he burned was just a piece of paper. The real assets were safely elsewhere, and I was the only one with the key. The only reason I was in that room was because I'd promised my grandfather, when the day came, I would listen. Not react. Not lose control. Just sit and observe. Because from the ashes of this pretense I would begin to build something no one could erase. When the will reading ended, I was the last to leave. No hugs, no handshakes, no farewells. I stepped into the hallway, the afternoon light slanting across the marble floor. On my chest, inside my inner pocket, the envelope my grandfather gave me a month ago remained secure. Red seal, his familiar handwriting, only open if they burn it. They burned it, so it was time. The fire caught faster than I expected. High-grade bank paper burned as easily as a wounded man's pride. The black ink faded to charred brown, curling into ash on the walnut table in the upscale boardroom. Sullivan Grant didn't flinch. My sister didn't either. They just watched my father, Leonard Monroe, burn the only proof they thought I had. I was ready for it. My grandfather warned me the last time we met at a dreary roadside diner. I still remember the lemon scent of the table cleaner, the chipped porcelain coffee mug, and his eyes not soft, not weak, just clear. Like someone who'd seen the ending, but still hoped I'd choose the best path afterward. Don't open it unless they try to burn everything, he said, sliding the envelope to me under the table wrapped in a napkin, like it was a family recipe. And if they do? I asked, half smiling, thinking he was being dramatic. He didn't smile. He just said, then you'll know what to do. I knew. Right now. Leonard dropped the burning check into a silver business card tray and stood tall as if he'd extinguished an old ghost. He brushed his hands and stared at me, his eyes sharper than the flames. You think he chose you because you're worthy? His voice was a slow, cold cut. No one turns their back on blood and then comes back to claim an inheritance. I didn't respond. Honestly, I didn't need to. I wasn't here to win with emotions. Alison looked at me from across the table, her gaze no longer disdainful, but confused. As if in the 5 years I'd been gone, she'd forgotten I might still be alive and dangerous. I sat still, smiled. A faint smile, just enough to let Leonard know the game he'd played was over. If you've ever had someone burn a piece of your existence, a letter, a photo, an apology, never spoken, drop a comment below. Not to wallow, but to remind each other some things seem reduced to ash, but they're only just beginning to ignite. The boardroom sank into a silence as thick as old cigarette smoke. Evelyn Grant quietly closed the file, adjusted her glasses. We've concluded the will reading. She glanced at me. Then Leonard, her tone more command than announcement. Any legal objections can be filed through my office within 48 hours per procedure. Leonard smirked. I'll do more than that. You're within your rights, Evelyn said. Alison stood first, leaving without a word, her heels clicking lightly on the stone floor like board taps. Leonard was slower. Before leaving, he stopped in front of me, leaning down to ensure I heard every word. You don't belong here, Rachel. Never did. I tilted my head, replying slowly. Thanks for confirming, Dad. When the door closed, it was just me and Evelyn. No condolences. None needed. I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket. 3 weeks since my grandfather's passing, and the red seal was still intact. Thick paper, the kind he used for everything from letters to grocery lists. His handwriting was still sharp, only open if they burn it. I turned to Evelyn. I need a quiet place. She nodded, pulling a key from her drawer. There's a private room at the end of the hall. No one will disturb you. I thanked her and left. The long hallway glowed with dim yellow light, like a theater mid-closing. Its stillness reminded me of the barracks at 2 a.m., where every small sound became clear, suspicious. The private room was a cozy corner with a leather chair and a simple wooden table. I locked the door, sat down, and opened the envelope with my fingernail. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a small USB drive taped with brown adhesive. Thick paper, notarized, dated October 16th, just as Evelyn said. I read each line, my hands trembling slightly by the end full transfer of assets and shares to Rachel Monroe, effective upon signing irrevocable. Below were his signature and 2 witnesses. One of them was Lucille, his old housekeeper. I remembered her. Vividly. The USB, I plugged it into my laptop. A single folder appeared, inheritance. Inside were PDFs, bank records, asset transfers, a breakdown of company shares, and a video named Final. I hesitated, then hit play. My grandfather's face appeared on the screen. He sat in his old, study-familiar brown leather chair, light streaming through the window, casting a halo behind him. His voice was as calm and deep as I remembered. If you're watching this, Rachel, then they've probably done what I thought they would. He looked straight into the camera. They'll call you a traitor. They'll burn papers. They'll say you're not worthy of anything. But they're wrong. I didn't choose you because of blood. I chose you because you've lived, honestly fought for what's right. Because you didn't ask. You only came when needed. I bit my lip, trying not to let tears fall. Don't react too soon. Don't get angry. Let them think they've won. Then act when the time comes. This USB will help you. He paused. I know you may not forgive this family, but don't let them steal the chance you deserve. Not for me, but for you. The video ended with a slow nod. No music, no logo. Just him, a man about to leave, entrusting me with what he valued most. I turned off the screen. Sat in the dark. My breathing stayed steady. But inside, a storm swirled. They thought they'd erased me. But I was still here, and I had proof. I had trust. And most importantly, I had time. When I left the room, the hallway was still empty. Evelyn sat at the boardroom table as if she'd never moved. "Do you have everything you need?" she asked. "One more thing," I replied. "What's that?" "The name of whoever signed my death certificate." She looked at me for a moment. "I'll find out." I nodded, took the envelope, laptop, USB, and left the building. The evening wind blew stronger, but I felt warm. Not from the coat, but because for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly where I was going. There's a strange feeling when you walk into a bank with all the right documents, only to be told you're dead. Not "there's an issue with your account." Not "please verify your identity." But "sorry, your file is closed due to a confirmed death." The teller looked at me like he'd just read a horror story. Young, platinum-dyed hair glasses too big for his face. His hands shook as he turned the screen toward me, though he tried to hide it. "Here, Ms. Monroe. The file shows deceased, closed account." I just looked at him. "I'm standing right in front of you." He gave a nervous laugh, the kind from someone who doesn't know how to react. "You're clearly alive." I leaned in, took a breath. "I need a copy of the account closure notice." "That requires a request from the central office," he said. "And, if I may ask, do you know who might have requested the closure?" I didn't answer. I left the bank, my heart as cold as the December wind blowing down 6th Avenue. For the first time in my life, I felt not just cast out from a family, but erased from the system itself, and I knew exactly who was behind it. I called the Veterans Affairs hotline. After 11 minutes of hold music, a woman named Carla picked up. Her voice was flat precise like a computer's. "I need to verify my VA file. Rachel Monroe. Service number." I gave the details. Heard typing. After a few seconds, Carla said, "Sorry, your file has been moved to inactive status." "Why?" "Reason noted deceased, confirmed by New York County Family Court. File code attached is 881 KN Seal." "Can you tell me who submitted that file?" "I'm not authorized to disclose the submitter's information." I closed my eyes. Another wall. But Carla said slowly, "If I were you, I'd start at the civil registry and family court. You might find something." I thanked her and hung up. Next stop, the DMV. I didn't expect much, but I had to be sure. I took a number, sat among a long line of weary people and outdated machines. An old man grumbled about his license being revoked despite eyes sharper than my wife's, making me chuckle briefly. The laugh faded when my number was called. The clerk, a middle-aged man with calloused typing hands, checked my file and frowned. "Ms. Monroe. The system shows your driver's license and federal ID have been revoked. Reason legal declaration of death per civil judgment." I gritted my teeth. "I'm still alive." He nodded. "Clearly, but the system doesn't think so." I requested a copy. He refused without a formal complaint. "Identity restoration takes 3 to 6 months," he said, "and if the court doesn't agree, it's denied." I gave a wry smile. "If the court thinks I'm dead, how do I prove otherwise?" He just looked at me. No answer. I left the DMV, my heart racing faster than it ever did in combat. Someone had turned me into a legal ghost. I headed to the family court in downtown. A cold, gray concrete building, tall and mute like fate itself. The woman at the records desk, about 50 sharp and detached, paused slightly when I explained. "Ms. Monroe, you're saying you were declared dead. Not voluntarily, if that's what you're asking." She checked the records. After a moment, she looked up. "There's a sealed file processed 3 weeks ago. The code matches the one Carla mentioned." I held my breath. "Does it say who requested it?" She nodded slowly. "Legal representative Leonard Monroe." I wasn't shocked. But my heart still ached like someone had tightened barbed wire around my chest. She continued. "The request included a medical evaluation certified by Dr. Cambria Fenney, a psychiatrist. The report states you exhibited paranoia and legal incapacity after your discharge." I froze. "I've never met that doctor," I said. She nodded. "The report claims you showed signs of post-traumatic stress impairing your ability to distinguish reality, especially regarding property rights. And the court believed it. If the paperwork was complete, they may not have summoned you. They considered it a decision in the best interest of an incapacitated party." I leaned on the counter. My eyes didn't water, but my mind was a storm. I've never had PTSD the way they described. I passed every psych eval after each withdrawal. I've had sleepless nights, sure, but I've never been disoriented. Never believed in things that weren't real. But now I wasn't real. The clerk slid a business card across the counter. "This is an identity restoration lawyer. Start here." I took it, walked outside, sat on the courthouse steps. The cold wind whipped my face. I felt nothing anymore. Hours ago, I was the legal heir. Now I was a shadow legally, but non-existent. Someone had crafted a script to erase me from everything, not just the inheritance, but my very identity. And they did it so well I almost admired them. I opened my laptop, typed Dr. Cambria Fenney. One result, a retired Dr. 67, formerly at Riverside Family Medicine Institute. Her home address was still listed in an old medical database. I wrote it down. If someone was behind my death certificate, the first person I needed to face was the one who signed off that I was too unstable to keep living. And I wanted to look her in the eyes to see what she saw in my file, or just the money in Leonard's account. There are people who walk quietly on the edges of your life, but one day hold the key to unlocking your entire fate. I thought my grandfather was the one who prepared me to face my family. I didn't expect he'd left another someone standing silently on the sidelines unnoticed, waiting for the right moment to speak the truth. I sought Lucille like you'd trace a letter with no return address, vague, but undeniably real. She was my grandfather's housekeeper for nearly 30 years, living on the top floor of his old house in Queens, where I used to visit as a kid. I still remember the kitchen smelling of cinnamon and the creaking wooden floors. Lucille taught me how to make apple pie on winter days when my father was in meetings and Alison was glued to the TV. Her address was still in the old directory my grandfather left on the USB. It took a few hours to confirm. Still there, a small red-tiled house next to an old bus stop lavender blooming on the balcony. Time seemed to have forgotten her or deliberately passed her by. I knocked. After a moment, the door opened, just enough to reveal half of a silver-haired woman's face. Her eyes flickered with recognition, then quickly shut, like a curtain drawn at noon. "I don't know you," she said softly but firmly. "You do." "Rachel Monroe," I replied. "Thomas's granddaughter." She didn't open the door further. "Go away, I can't talk. I'm not here for money. I'm here for him." Lucille paused for a second. I heard the chain behind the door unlatch, and it opened. She was older than I remembered, but her voice was still as resolute as ever. She led me inside, no questions, just pointed to an armchair by the window. The house was small, clean, slightly dated. An old rose-patterned rug-lace curtains from another decade. On a shelf was a photo of me and my grandfather, me on his shoulders, laughing like the world held no fear. Lucille set 2 cups of tea on the table. I looked at her, waiting. "I can't help you," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Why, I asked. You know what happened. They're trying to erase me from everything. They faked documents, declared me dead, even fabricated a medical report. They don't just want the money, they want me gone." She didn't respond, just gripped her teacup tightly. "I'm not asking you to risk yourself," I said softly. "But if anyone was there, when he signed the real will, if anyone heard him speak, it's you." Lucille sighed, slowly. "I promised I wouldn't get involved. I thought I could keep that promise. But you also promised to protect him," I said. "And this is when that promise matters." I pulled a small note from my pocket, a copy of a handwritten letter from my grandfather encoded on the USB. I read aloud, "If you can't trust anyone else, find the one who knew the old alarm code. The only one who knew I feared the dark at night. The one who signed for me when I broke my arm in 2002. The only one I'd trust to tell the truth when I'm gone." Lucille froze. I saw her eyes redden. She took a long breath, then broke down. Not loud sobs, but the quiet collapse of someone who'd held silence too long. "I was the witness," she said, voice hoarse. "I was there, in the room, when he signed the real will, with a notary. There's even a video." My heart pounded, not from surprise but from a relief I hadn't felt in years. "He didn't want them to know right away," she continued. "He feared Leonard would try to destroy everything if he knew. So he gave the original to the law office, and another copy to me." "Where's that copy now?" She stood, walked slowly to her bedroom. She returned with a small wooden box. Inside was an old envelope, its red seal identical to the one he'd given me. "I was going to burn it," she said. "After he passed, Leonard came to me. Offered money, a lot. Threatened to sue if I spoke. I was scared. I live alone, no one to turn to. But then I saw you on the news at the will reading." "I thought I'd been erased," I said with a bitter smile. "He could never erase you. Not with papers, not with money." I took the envelope, handling it like a lifeline. Warmth spread through me. For the first time in days, I wasn't alone. "Will you testify if needed?" I asked. Lucille looked at me, then nodded. If it's for him, I'll tell everything. They can't threaten me forever. I stood. Thank you, truly. She took my hand, squeezed gently. You're more like him than you know. Not in blood, but in never giving up. When I left that small house in Queens, the evening breeze had softened. The sky was still gray, but inside me was a clear light. I had proof. I had a witness. And most importantly, I had the truth. That night, I returned to Lucille's. She'd called her voice soft, but firm. I've kept something else. From him. He wanted you to have it, if things went the right way. I knew she meant, if I was still alive, still daring to see this through. The small house in Queens was quiet as a miniature church. Lucille welcomed me in carrying an old metal box, the kind she used to store recipes and family photos when I was a kid. But this time it held no gentle memories. She opened the lid, revealing a handwritten letter tied with a thin navy ribbon. His familiar script on the envelope, Rachel, if they betray you. I took it, my hands trembling slightly. It felt like touching the past, but also stepping into something irreversible. Beneath the letter was a small recorder, the old kind that used AA batteries, as if my grandfather didn't trust modern tech to hold the truth. He left it for me, Lucille said softly with instructions. Only give it to you if everything went as he predicted. And you think it's time, she nodded. I wasn't sure at first. But seeing you now, I know he was right. I opened the letter first. The paper was lightly yellowed, still carrying the faint tobacco scent that clung to him like a signature. I read each word, each line, and with every sentence a part of me was stitched back together after so many tears. Rachel, if you're reading this, you've likely seen the true face of our family, or at least the face of the father I once hoped for. I'm not writing to apologize for what you've been through. You don't need pity. You need the truth. I chose you not because you carry the Monroe name, but because you dared to shed it when it became a chain. You're the only one in this family who said no to money, no to power, and yes to responsibility. They'll try to undo everything. Call you a traitor, mad, delusional. But I know you're stronger than their labels. If you've kept your promise to live upright, to live true, then you're worthy of everything I've left. Not for me, but so you'll know how to pass it on to the right people later. Thomas, I didn't realize tears had fallen. Not from pain, but from seeing myself in a light no one in that family ever offered. Lucille sat quietly. She didn't ask anything. Just waited until I was ready to press play on the recorder. I did so with both hands, not because it was heavy, but because the past never returns lightly. His voice came through deep and steady, like the times he told me stories at the foot of the old stairs during a blackout. If you're hearing this, Rachel, then I'm gone, and I believe what I feared has happened. He paused, took a breath. I pictured him in his study, a dim lamp and a cold cup of tea beside him. Leonard doesn't understand what's real. Alison's too tired to care. But you've lived, fought, endured. You're not the granddaughter I hoped for, but the one I know the world needs. He chuckled softly. I didn't leave everything for you to spend. I left it for you to protect. Maybe for people you've never met. People underestimated like you were. You're the only one I know who can stand before power and not bow. If they say you're dead, use this truth to live again. And this time live as the heir not of money, but of trust. The recording ended with a small click, maybe him turning it off or someone knocking at the door. I sat still, the room's light casting over my hands, holding both the letter and the recorder, as if clutching a piece of his soul he'd left behind. You were threatened by Leonard, I said, looking at Lucille. She nodded. He came after Thomas passed. Gave me an envelope. Double what I earned in a year. Said if I stayed quiet, I'd retire peacefully. And you took it. I kept the envelope. But I haven't touched the money. Every time I thought to open it, I remembered Thomas. And you. Will you speak now? Lucille squeezed my hand. I've been silent my whole life. Enough. We sat together for a long while. No words. Just the silence of solidarity deeper than any shout. When I left that house the second time, I carried more than evidence. I carried testimony. Someone who'd seen with eyes, ears, and heart that my grandfather believed in me. That I wasn't imagining. That I wasn't mad. That I was alive. I went to Grace Patel's law office on a gray Monday morning. No rain, no sun, just a lingering gloom, like old memories. The office was on the 7th floor of an old building in Brooklyn Heights, renovated with glass and steel, but still creaking with wooden stairs. Grace was the first to believe me without proof. Maybe because she too had been dismissed in a system not built for immigrant women who were smart and unyielding. Miles, her legal assistant, younger than me, thick glasses with a photographic memory, and a shy smile when nervous. "Let's get started," Grace said, pointing to a table strewn with papers. I pulled out the backup will from Lucille, the letter, the recording, and a copy of the death certificate I'd obtained unofficially from an old friend at the Justice Department. Miles opened his laptop, projecting scanned documents onto a large screen. "This is the file declaring Rachel Monroe, born May 6, 1988. Deceased on October 21st this year due to neurological complications post-combat trauma." The request was signed under emergency procedure by two legal representatives, Leonard Monroe and Alison Monroe. I gripped the armrests. "Are the signatures authentic?" I asked. "We're analyzing," Grace replied. "What's odd is the filing date is October 19th, but the document lists the 21st 2 days later, meaning the file was predicted in advance. So they signed for a day that hadn't happened." I frowned. Miles nodded. "Or faked the date. Or had someone back them to approve it before it was legally valid." Grace flipped to the asset transfer Sullivan Grant had given me, the official one confirming my ownership effective October 16th. "If this transfer is legally binding from the 16th, she said, any subsequent attempt to invalidate your identity infringes on your legal property rights. And if they knew that beforehand, filing the death certificate becomes organized fraud," Miles added. "We just need to prove they knew you were alive and deliberately erased your name." I played a segment of the recording, my grandfather's clear words. "If they say you're dead, use this truth to live again." Grace listened and nodded. "We have enough to open a preliminary hearing to void the death certificate. Can we do it now?" I asked. "Possibly," Grace said. "But I need to warn you." She leaned toward me, her eyes hardening. "Are you ready, Rachel? They won't back down. They don't just want the assets. They want control. And this time, knowing you're alive, they'll do anything to silence you for real." I met her gaze. "I've been airlifted out of a war zone. Not because I surrendered. I just needed time to come back." We kept analyzing the files. Miles found a detail. "Look here. Leonard's signature from last year slants left. The one in the emergency file slants right." "Forged?" I asked. "Or signed by proxy?" Miles shrugged. "I'll need an expert to verify." Meanwhile, Grace flipped to a bank transfer printout. Here she pointed October 18th one day, before the death certificate filing a $250,000 withdrawal from Alien's secondary trust fund transferred to an account under A. Monroe. I looked. "Alison." Grace nodded. "And coincidentally, that same day, $25,000 was transferred to Dr. Cambria Finney's account." My chest tightened. "They paid her to fake a psych report," I muttered, "and used it as the legal basis to declare me incapacitated and dead." "All the pieces fit," Grace said. "The question now is, how do you want to strike back?" I leaned back. The room grew quiet, only Miles's typing like the urgent breath of truth waiting to be named. "I want them in court," I said. "Not to reclaim money, but to make them face what they've done." Grace nodded. "I'll file an emergency appeal to void the death certificate," she said, "then request the court to preserve evidence and pursue criminal liability for legal fraud." "And me?" I asked. She smiled. "You prepare to appear for the first time as a survivor, an heir, and someone who can't be forgotten." Leaving the office, I stood alone by the elevator. Light from a small window fell on my hand, clutching the folder of evidence. Just enough to rip the mask off those who thought my name could be erased. The battlefield taught me not how to win, but how to keep breathing when everything collapses. And today, I needed that more than ever. New York City Courthouse, 4th floor courtroom 6A. A space designed to either filter truth or choke it depending on who holds the mic. I sat on the plaintiff's side between Grace and Miles, each of us calm or pretending to be. Across was Leonard, as always, gray suit, black tie, a wrinkle-free face, but eyes like he'd just closed a deal. Beside him was his lawyer, Roderick Hale, known as the reputation cleaner for the powerful. Alison was there too, her gaze quiet like she was watching a documentary about strangers. Judge Karen Lee, former federal prosecutor, entered, banged the gavel. Hearing on the motion to void the death certificate and confirm Rachel Monroe's inheritance, begin. I sat up straight. Time to breathe right. Grace opened with the documents from our prep, the legal transfer from my grandfather, the letter, the recording, and bank records showing suspicious transactions before the death filing. Each document flashed on the big screen, money trails, seals, signature comparisons. I'd like to note, Grace said the authentic will of Thomas Monroe was signed, notarized, and filed at the law office before any other legal documents were submitted. Subsequent actions to invalidate Rachel Monroe's identity and rights are illegal. Roderick stood his tone dripping with sarcasm. Your Honor, everything the plaintiff presents lacks verifiable legal origin. A recording can be easily fabricated. A letter no witnesses. And someone absent from family life for over 5 years suddenly appears claiming victimhood. We question Ms. Monroe's mental stability. I didn't flinch, but Grace fired back. And her mental stability is questioned by whom A, report signed by Dr. Cambria Fenney, who received a gift payment just before signings. The courtroom stirred. Alison briefly lowered her head. Leonard's face didn't change. We'll present a sworn affidavit from Dr. Fenney Grace, continued confirming she was pressured and never examined the client. Judge Lee leaned forward. Counselor Hale, your response to the fraud allegation. Roderick rose slowly. We haven't received any legal confirmation of that affidavit. I have it, a voice rang from the back of the room. I turned. The rear door opened. Lucille, dark coat cloth bag in hand, walked in. Her steps weren't fast, but they were resolute. Leonard and Alison froze. Lucille went straight to the witness stand. Without prompting, she said to the judge, I witnessed Thomas Monroe sign the original will. I have his letter and recording entrusted to me to testify if Rachel was cast aside. She pulled a thick envelope from her bag seal intact. Handed it to Grace. Original evidence, she said. With seals and legal verification codes. No one spoke. No one dared. Grace passed the documents to the court clerk. They opened, checked, verified. The will matched my copy perfectly. The video matched frame for frame. I looked at Leonard. He didn't meet my eyes. Just stared down, hands clenched white. Alison looked at Lucille for the first time, her gaze softened, like she was trying to recall something long lost. Judge Lee nodded, her voice low but heavy as a final gavel. After reviewing the original evidence, legal witness, and discrepancies in the defendant's filings, I rule Rachel Monroe's death certificate is invalid based on falsified evidence and organized fraud. Thomas Monroe's original will is legally recognized and effective. Rachel Monroe is the sole and lawful heir under New York state law. The gavel struck. 1, 2, 3. The room fell silent. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Just felt a chill run down my spine like a storm had passed, leaving the ground clean and aching. The judge left. Hale packed his papers in silence. Leonard stood without a word, but I saw him tilt his head as if acknowledging for the first time that he'd lost. Not because I won, but because the truth survived. Lucille came to me, said nothing, just took my hand. Thank you, I whispered. No one can erase the truth when it's spoken with a loyal heart. She smiled. No one should live in silence forever. We left the courthouse. The rain had stopped. To the west, sunlight pierced the clouds like a promise that didn't need words. I've always believed a legacy isn't in wealth, but in what you leave in others' hearts. And now, standing in my grandfather's old house, once an office, a home, a fortress, I knew I had to start here. The building sat on a corner in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Red brick exterior, curved glass windows, black iron balconies shaped like arches. Inside was dust, old light, and memories untouched for years. When I returned, the lock was rusted, but I didn't need a key. I had legal rights, and more importantly, a reason to open the door. The first room I entered was the old living room. High ceilings, oak floors, the left corner still marked by the fireplace he'd built himself. On the mantel was a photo of him and Mimi on his shoulders, wearing a silver paper crown, laughing like the world was just a quirky game. Below the photo, taped to the frame, was a handwritten note. Takes more than fire to stop royalty. It took a moment to remember he'd said that when the kitchen caught fire once because of a forgotten pie. I'd panicked, cried. He laughed, scooped me up, and said it like he and I were king and princess, unstoppable by any flame. I laughed. A real laugh, light and tearful. Maybe you have places like that, childhood strongholds forgotten, then rediscovered like a small miracle. If you've stood in an old place and felt healed, share it. I want to read your story. I didn't restore the building to live in. I restored it to give back. Just as he did, creating spaces for those with nowhere to stand. The project's name came to me while standing alone in the empty kitchen, looking out at bare trees through the window, Hollow Haven. I'd been hollow once. Wandered places where no one asked my name, but I found a place to return. And now I'd open that door for others. Hollow Haven is the first nonprofit in the area dedicated to female veterans, disconnected from society income, and honor those forgotten not by war's bullets, but by its silence. With part of the fund he left, I hired architects to restore the first floor as an office, the second as a counseling space, and the third as temporary housing for veterans without homes. The remaining rooms would be a library, community space, art therapy area, and job training center. When I pitched it to the local council, someone asked, "Aren't you afraid of family backlash? They could sue again." I just smiled. I'm not living in their shadow anymore. And I'm not using money to hold power. I'm using it to fix what power got wrong. Miles designed Hollow Haven's logo, a burning paper crown, still shimmering silver. A silly but beautiful symbol. Grace handled the legal paperwork, building an advisory board. Lucille came every afternoon bringing apple pies for the women. The first week of opening, 6 women came. The second, 12. The third one returned bringing a friend. And I knew the seed had sprouted. A woman named Kira, once in Afghanistan back home and stripped of child custody due to a manipulated psych record, sat with me one late evening. "You know," she said, "I thought there was nowhere left to say I wasn't crazy, that I was just hurting, and no one listened." I took her hand. I thought that too. We didn't need to say more. Survivors don't need to describe wounds, just know the person across from them stood through the storm and is still here. One afternoon, I went to the 3rd floor, my private office. In a drawer, I found my grandfather's old files. Drafts he never sent, half-written letters to old friends, and a small notebook, handwritten ideas for Rachel if she comes back. The first page read, "Skills classroom, music room, small garden plant mint, and someone to teach the kids not just how to survive, but how to keep their softness." I sat still. I thought I was strong because I was tough. But he knew the greatest strength was not losing your heart after surviving. If you've ever thought you had to be iron to be respected, tell me. I was like that. And I'm learning to be soft again without fearing weakness. That afternoon, I stayed alone in the office. The sky outside darkened. I turned on the lamp, poured a cup of mint tea from the new plants in the backyard garden. Then I looked at the old photo again. Paper crowned my grandfather's childhood laughter. I don't know how far Hollow Haven will go. I don't know who'll carry it on. But I know this. I lived. I came back. And I didn't let the name Rachel Monroe become a footnote in forgotten files. I turned it into a beginning. Forgiveness doesn't start with magnanimity. It starts with confusion, with a strange name on a familiar list. I was in my office on Hollow Haven's 3rd floor, skimming new volunteer files. It's a habit I've kept since the start, not because I don't trust the management team, but because I want to touch each story, each person entering this house. Like he did. Like I wished someone had done for me. The 3rd page stopped me. Name, Anna Miles. Age 36. Reason for volunteering. Had a family member in the military. Wants to help women reintegrate after trauma. Experience, HR coordinator, private family organization. I read it again. Private family organization. I knew what Alison did, where she managed, who she controlled. But what made my heart skip wasn't the text. It was the handwriting. I recognized the slight slant of the L, the dot on the I, veering right, Alison's habit since she was 12. I used to mimic her writing to forge absence notes. My hand still remembers. I closed the file. Sat quietly for a long time. My heart raced in a way I didn't expect, like realizing someone slipped into your home, not with a sound, but with a familiar breath. Alison, the one who with my father signed my death certificate, the one who watched him burn a $38 million check in front of me without blinking, the one who shared a bedbooks in fear of the dark when our mother died, but in the end stayed silent when I needed a nod. And now, 3 months after the court recognized me as the rightful heir, she appeared, with a new name. No apology, no sign of remorse, just a neat, careful volunteer application as if no wounds had ever been inflicted. The next day I didn't share the file with anyone. I went to the 2nd floor where new volunteers were trained by Kira, the veteran who lost her child's custody, now a pillar of Haven. Anna Miles was dusting bookshelves. Back straight movements, slow, deliberate like something sacred. I recognized that posture from our last photo together. Her head tilted, right hand resting lightly on her other wrist, as if steadying herself from trembling. She knew I was there, I'm certain, but she didn't look up. I walked away saying nothing. On the 3rd day, I saw her talking to a newly admitted veteran, a young woman named Haley, voiceless from trauma. Anna sat patiently holding her hand, writing words in the air like teaching a child to spell her own name. I passed through the hall, hands clenched. Not from anger, but because I didn't know what to do with the feeling growing in my chest. On the 5th day, I left a note on her table in the library. "We need to talk, Rachel." That evening, she came to my office. No panic, no pretense. "You knew from the first day I said not looking at her." She nodded. "You were always the one who noticed everything first. So why are you here? For remorse? To see if I'll forgive you, or to hide from your guilt?" Alison didn't sit. She stood, hand still lightly on her wrist. "Not for forgiveness," she said. "You don't owe me that." I looked up. For the first time, her eyes held no defense. "Then why?" "Because you held on to something I lost. Once you stood before them, before money, before fear, and you didn't back down." I did. I stayed silent. I chose safety, and I regret it every day. I said nothing. She took a step, but didn't come closer. "When I saw Havens saw the people here, I understood why he chose you. You don't need me to say that to know it. But I need to be here. Not to be recognized, but to do what's right. Silence was wrong. So now I act." She turned to the door, paused. "If you want, I'll leave right now." I looked at my hands' fingers that once held a rifle, now just a cold teacup. "You don't need to leave," I said softly. "But you don't get to use a new name." She turned back, surprised. "Your name is Alison Monroe. And if you want to redeem yourself, start by not hiding behind a stranger's name." She nodded. Once, then left. From that day, the file was updated Alison Monroe, official volunteer. No one knew who she was. They didn't need to. She cleaned rooms, washed linens, listened for hours. No apologies. Just action. And I didn't stop her. Didn't mention it. Didn't ask more. Because I understood some mistakes don't need forgiveness in words. They need a chance to be made right. But I wasn't ready to call her sister. Not because I hated her, but because I wasn't ready to trust. Forgiveness to me was once a battle, a confrontation, an internal trial where I was both defendant and prosecutor. I thought forgiving meant saying it all, pain, betrayal, anger, before letting go. But sometimes it's just silence, and a nod. That day the sky wasn't beautiful. Low clouds, cold wind, the sun, unsure if it should show up. I arrived early at Hollow Haven's central courtyard, carrying a thermos of coffee and a small notebook with plans to expand the back building. We aimed to add 3 rooms, 2 for living, 1 for baking classes. Demand was growing. And I was starting to believe this place would outlive me. The courtyard was once an old parking lot. Now it's paved with new bricks draped with climbing vines lit by golden lamps. At dusk, the lights glow over oak benches, making it feel like a garden lost in the city. I sat by the lavender, opened my notebook. My fingers were still cold, not just from the wind. A figure emerged from the left path. I didn't look up, but I knew that walk. The slight tilt of shoulders to the left. The pause, then half step, like testing the air. Alison. No fake name, no role-playing. Just the woman I once called sister, then lost not to death, but to 5 years of silence. She said nothing. Neither did I. I thought I'd ask, why, what were you thinking? How could you let me go like that? But the questions dissolved like morning dew before a weak sun. She sat on the bench across from me, just far enough not to touch. I looked up, not with challenge, not with fear, and saw in her eyes something new, gratitude, and a hope for forgiveness, but not a demand. She pulled out a small paper, not a letter, not a long explanation. Just an old photo. 2 kids sitting together, one holding a comic book, the other clutching a hand eyes closed. It was me. It was her. The day our mother died. Below the photo in her blue ink. You were the only one who didn't let go of my hand that day. And now it's my turn not to let go of yours. I read it, didn't respond. Just looked up deep into the eyes I'd once run from. No apology. No, I was wrong. No tears, no trembling. Just a look and a nod. I nodded back. Like a thin thread between us snapped, then reconnected not with a knot, but with compassion. No need for the past to be justified. No need for the future to be promised. She sat a moment longer, then stood. Said nothing, didn't wait for me to see her off. I stayed holding the photo. The courtyard lamps flickered on their light soft as an answer I didn't need to hear aloud. Since then, Alison didn't avoid me, but she didn't try to get close either. She did the work counseling, cleaning, teaching admin skills to newcomers. No boasting, no demands. Once I saw her in the courtyard, helping Haley learn to write a job application email. Haley smiled. Her first in months. I turned away, leaving them together. Someone asked me later, Rachel, how could you forgive your sister? I thought for a moment, then said, I don't know if I've forgiven her. I just know for the first time in years thinking of her doesn't hurt anymore. And maybe that's forgiveness. That afternoon I returned to my office. On the desk was a sealed envelope, no sender's name. I opened it. Inside was a letter from Sullivan Grant, the firm that held the will reading. Evelyn, the old secretary, wrote, Rachel Thomas left a file he said to give you, only when she's no longer angry. I didn't know how to measure that, but seeing what Hollow Haven is becoming, I believe it's time. The file contains an unannounced part of the legacy, not assets, but final wishes. Something he kept back. For you alone to fulfill. If you're ready, come see me. Just you. Evelyn. I folded the letter, my heart heavy, as the day I heard my name erased from the world. An unannounced legacy. A wish only I could fulfill. Some moments stop time. Not because they're earth-shattering, but because they touch the deepest part of you, where faith was buried, then awakened by a simple phrase. That day began like any other at Hollow Haven. Early spring chill lavender not yet bloomed. The first-floor reception desk dappled with thin golden sunlight through frosted glass. I arrived early, coffee in hand, planning to finalize a new funding proposal. But before I could start, I heard the front door swing open. A woman walked in. Faded parka, old military backpack slung over one shoulder, hair in a messy bun, eyes that had seen too much, but never been truly seen. I stood. Hi, I'm Rachel. How can I help you today? She was silent for a few seconds, then said slowly, clearly, I'm Tori Vale. I served at Fort Carson. 5 years. Then I was discharged for not fitting unit culture. I nodded. Waited. I'm not here for money, she continued, eyes locked on mine. I just need someone to believe me. I froze. Her words brushed my chest, touching unhealed scars. I'd said those words too. In the military psych ward. In the VA interview room. At the hearing where Leonard's lawyer called me emotionally unstable. All I wanted was one person to believe I wasn't making it up. I invited her to sit. Gave her a hot tea. We sat quietly for a few minutes. Long enough for her breathing to steady. Tori, I said, are you ready to tell your story? She nodded. And told it. She'd been harassed by a superior in her second tour. When she reported it, they opened an internal investigation, then quickly closed it with insufficient evidence. She was transferred given poor conduct reviews, and finally discharged with a less than honorable status, a red stain that barred her from veteran jobs. She'd been sleeping in a friend's garage for 2 months. Once she considered taking sleeping pills to disappear cleanly, but she saw an article about Hollow Haven on a stranger's forgotten phone in a diner, and thought, maybe that place is different. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because speaking too soon wouldn't carry enough weight. I pulled an old file from my desk drawer, cream-colored, red-bordered. I'd kept it separate, never used. On the cover in my handwriting from Haven's opening day, Client, Drevrozer 1. I hadn't decided who'd be the first name. I just waited. For the moment, my heart knew, this is it. And it was. I took the old red pen my grandfather used for his most important documents. I wrote slowly. Tori Vale. Intake date, April 3. Initial status. Seeking a place to be believed. Expected status, believing in herself. I showed her the file. She looked at her name. Didn't believe. Didn't understand. Didn't dare breathe too hard. Tori, I said you're the first I've written by hand, because the first ones deserve to be remembered with real ink. She cried. Not loudly, not shaking. Just tears spilling like a stream finding a crack. I didn't comfort. I didn't soothe. I just held her hand. 3 weeks later, Tori was the one opening the doors each morning. She arranged bookshelves, greeted visitors, counseled newcomers no one else could reach. I heard her tell a young woman on her first day, here, no one measures your worth by your wounds. They measure it by how you overcome them. I turned away. My heart unfurled like a parachute, not for anything grand, but for seeing someone who'd fallen lift another up. That night I pulled out Client Narvoza 1's file again. Below Tori's name, I added in red ink. The first to walk in and remind me that legacy isn't in money, but in how we see each other. Some days you remember forever. Not because they're loud, but because they close a chain of silences you've walked through step by step. That day the sky was unusually clear. Not a cloud, as if the heavens made room for something that needed clarity. I climbed the city courthouse steps with a file in hand, not for litigation, not for accusations, but an official ownership registration. I could have sent someone else, but I didn't. Because this wasn't just legal. It was a ritual. A final confirmation of what I'd fought for my whole life to be named not by others, but by my own hand. Counter 7, first floor. The clerk asked for my name. Rachel Monroe. I said each word deliberate, like it needed to live again. The woman scanned the screen, scrolled through data, then looked up. You're the designated owner of the property at 186 Carroll Street, and all remaining shares of the Thomas Monroe Foundation. I nodded. And you're the named head of the Hollow Haven Studio project. That's right. She smiled faintly, handed me a paper certificate of legal ownership. Red seal, embossed, signed by 3 federal agencies. I held it like holding myself for the first time, not through battle, but through a journey of willing survival. The new studio sits behind Hollow Haven. No fancy sign, just a small wooden plaque handwritten, Monroe Workshop for Women Who Build Themselves Again. Inside is an open space, large wooden tables, a 3D printer, a business skills area, a bookshelf on corporate law, and a small kitchen. Because I believe great ideas start where people are invited to eat together. No CEO's office, no leather armchairs, just wooden chairs in a circle. We don't train leaders. We train survivors to become creators. At the opening, I didn't give a long speech. I just shared one thing once I nearly had my name erased from every official record. They called me unstable, unfit for family values, dead. But I didn't die. I came back. And instead of reclaiming an old place, I built a new one for myself, and those forced to the margins. Then I held up a white frame, silver-edged. Inside was the official ownership certificate I'd just received. Below, in my grandfather's pen. They tried to erase me, but I built what they can't touch. Some cried, some clapped. Some just sat silently clutching their hands. I didn't need anyone to call it a victory. I just needed someone to understand existence doesn't need permission. It just needs to be lived truly. That evening I returned to my grandfather's old building. Still Carroll Street. Still the red bricks as witnesses. But now every step bore a different footprint. Not of an heir, but of someone reborn. I stood at the door certificate in hand, held it up. Not to boast, not for revenge, but to mark the proof some things can't be erased by law, like faith, memory, resilience. Behind me, laughter echoed from the courtyard. Alison was teaching veterans to budget. Lucille stood by the kitchen slicing apples, sharing stories of my grandfather. Tori, headphones on, guided a newcomer through an online job application. I smiled faintly. None of them knew exactly what I'd been through, and I didn't need them to. I just needed them here, together. I wrote the final entry in the project journal. This building once belonged to a man who believed I'd find myself again. Now it belongs to a generation of women learning to believe in themselves again. And I'm no longer the one erased. I'm the one writing others' names with all the trust I once longed for. My journey wasn't just a legal fight for assets or identity. It was a journey to find myself from the ashes of the past, through the pain of betrayal, to a place of healing through empathy, resolve, and humanity. I learned that honor doesn't come from medals or names on a will. It comes from standing up even when erased from the world. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but the strongest choice when facing those who hurt you. And true value lies in helping others find their voice, as I was given a chance. If you see yourself in this story, whether silenced, left behind, or on a journey back to yourself, leave a comment below. And if you want to keep following stories of healing, rising, and courage, don't forget to follow the channel, share this video, because someone out there might need to hear what you just did.